for Wave Your Grades, coming to you every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. right here on KUAW. This program features
You
American
on?
students striving for excellence in honor of our troops
There
and
you go. So
American veterans, encouraging.
We are live here today with Shifting Paradigms. I'm your host, B. Michael. We have a very special show today with a very, very special guest to me, and we will get to that shortly. But Shifting Paradigms is a show that is intent on stimulating critical thought in order to realistically redefine our narrative and positively reshape our reality through dialogue with self-determination. And we've been doing this for almost a year now, so it's been a pretty good stretch that we've had some good shows. And tonight's show, I hope, is a very stimulating, insightful, encouraging, and uplifting show. We're going to be talking about co-parenting paradigmatics, and the guest that we have here this evening is, I call her my twin. She's the mother of my second born child, Noah Eli. Her name is Candace Benton. So the mic is yours, young lady.
Shalom. Thank you for having me on this evening. I'm excited about this topic. I think it's something I wish people would talk about a little more openly, but we'll share openly and hopefully people can relate.
No doubt, no doubt. So give the listeners a little background about Candace Benton. Where you from? What some of your interests are. So on and so forth. What you're doing now, and all the good stuff.
Okay. I'm born and raised in New Orleans, Louisiana. I met B. Michael Long while living in Columbia, Missouri, and now I live in Chicago. I'm a social worker, and I work with seniors. I don't want to delve into that too much, but I'm a mother of two, also an entrepreneur. So, what was your other question? What do I like? What do I enjoy?
Some of the interesting things.
Reading,
Right.
reading and writing.
No doubt.
Poetry,
No
good
doubt.
music.
True. Very true. Okay. So tonight, we're gonna be talking about co-parenting again, and our story, which is a very movie script type of story if you really look at it. We're gonna be discussing matters of like love and loss and hurt and healing and betrayal, forgiveness, because our story is very winding in a lot of different ways, and we've come a long way, and I'll yield the floor to you in terms of sharing your side of a synopsis of what we've come through to get to this particular point of our co-parenting experiences with our son Noah Eli. So do you want to start, or do you want me to start?
I think you should.
Okay, so she mentioned that we met in 2005 at a poetry reading, but we didn't really meet. It was just kind of like a passing meet, and there was just some sort of interesting connection there that we were still putting our finger on. And so some years down the line, we ended up meeting on social media, and we are getting to know each other. I was actually in a separated situation in a marriage. I was separated, and so in that separation and moving into my own space, trying to get into a new space of my life, we crossed paths again, and we ended into like a courtship, and of course we have our son, who was born in this process as well, and it just took some very challenging turns, just due to things not really being brought to a full closure, I guess you could say, in a simple way to put it, and dealing with a lot of different challenges in my mind and heart, and dealing with just frustrations, personal frustrations and things of that nature. We ended up going through just a dark spell of no contact, and this included me not being there for my son for a number of years. and it was just dealing with guilt and shame and things of that nature, just personal disappointment of some of the things that, I had allowed to take place. And it was just a hard time that we really went through. That was about, what, a 7-8 year stretch almost, that really just brought a lot of pain and grief. And for me, just like, I was very fragmented, in my life. My life had a bunch of different fragments to it that I hadn't really been able to reconcile. And the co-parenting experience at that particular time was pretty moot and mute and not present, and it's something that I really look back on and would definitely do different. We ended up getting a paternity test just to confirm things, that were being kind of put into the air. And, of course, the results came back 99.9999% mine. So, but even in that, there were still some challenges that I was facing myself, that I didn't really, step up to the plate as a man, as a father, and provide for my son. And so there was just a bunch of different challenges that we faced with that. And what did you do in that process? What was your mindset, and how did you go about seeking to, establish some sort of balance in your life, given that missing piece of fatherhood for me?
Well, I moved on pretty quickly. Noah was a baby. It was actually around 5 months on my first date with someone I was in a long-term relationship with, for about 8 years, throughout that span of time. So in my experience, I still consider myself blessed. I didn't really experience single motherhood. Co-parenting is the topic tonight, and I have co-parenting experience in a few different ways. With my oldest child, I've co-parented with a present and available co-parent. That's been a really consistent, stable relationship, and she has a healthy relationship today with me and her father and her family on both sides. So that's one paradigm. And I have experience, like you mentioned, with an absent and unavailable co-parent. And I also have experience with a co-step parent in the home. So my time apart from you, there wasn't really, I was mad at first. At first, I was mad because, like you mentioned, you were separated and there were a lot of promises made. And as long as I was looking at you, I was mad. But one of the things that happened along my journey was I started to look at myself more and started to take accountability, partially through some of the things I was going through in that relationship, and realizing, when the shoe is on the other foot, you process things differently. And I realized, in the long term that, there were great lessons in all these experiences. So for you, to touch on the DNA topic, that was, I want to be very clear that the questions that were raised were not because of my behavior or anything that I did, because that's, obviously the first assumption when something like that comes up. Right. But I think that particularly with men co-parenting, there's always a woman, who's an advisor to them, sometimes a friend, sometimes a new girlfriend, sometimes a mother. They have to be aware of the influence that women have in their lives, and women have to be aware of the influence, that we have in a man's life. And so, the story that I was told was that the influence was coming from your new girlfriend, who said the influence on her was coming from your mother. And ultimately, I don't know what their reasons were. Maybe we'll talk about it one day, maybe not. But I know what the truth is. Mm-hmm. And so as I learned more about me and owned my role as a mother, I looked more at what's my responsibility to my children,
Right.
and what's my responsibility, and even holding the other parent, accountable. So throughout that time, I've always had an open door. I've always communicated with you, not maybe not consistently, because I don't like to force things, but it's always been understood that you are encouraged to have a relationship with Noah.
Right.
Um, so I don't know. I don't want to ramble on and on. I could talk about it forever,
No,
but
that's real though.
um, forgiveness was a gift that I was given, and without getting into the fullness
Mm-hmm.
of that story or testimony, a part of the vision, was well, part of just receiving a new heart was, the ability to forgive what happened, to forgive the absence, and
Right.
to allow you to be present if you're willing to,
Right. And that was major for me because it started a process of healing for me, and I was very resistant in the beginning, just due to my personal, letdowns and disappointments. Um, and I was very calloused. I was emotionally unavailable. I was physically, materially unavailable, for my son. And it just, it resonated in some ways that were just not really good for me, and it just presented a lot of different challenges that I was just suppressing, you know. And if it was not for the forgiveness that you extended, you know, based on the revelation that you shared with me, it would have really just, I don't know, maybe stayed just stuck. And I would have stayed stuck and not really able to deal with, that healing process and build a relationship with Noah and to really get back into, a place of co-parenting, you know. So that's huge though, and I do attribute a lot of that to the spirit working through you to really touch me to get myself into a better place, so that Noah can have both of his parents involved in his life, and that's significant for our communities and for our children and for the next generation and for just the present reality of our existence, you know. Um, so yeah, any other points you want to touch on before we get more into the co-parenting paradigm? Because I think that it's good to provide our listeners with some background of where we come from to get to a place where we can, just share our experiences with others. Anything else you want to say?
Well, I come from a single parent household, and I'm grateful for my mother because she grabbed a lot of lessons and she passed those on. Ideally, that wasn't the goal, a single
Right.
parent household, but I'll say that a lot of what she taught me prepared me for some of the challenges, that I dealt with along the way.
No doubt.
Um,
Shout out to Mama Hadassah.
yeah, shout out to Mama Hadassah. Sure she's watching.
Indeed.
Um,
Indeed.
but one thing that she instilled in us was children's rights. Children have a right to know both
Mm-hmm.
parents and know who they are, know where they come from, know have all the love that's available to them. And number two, to lead with love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and sometimes that means making really hard decisions. Sometimes love is staying away when you don't have the right words. When the words you have might be damaging at the time. Until you process your own thoughts. Um, and also being a responsible parent, was something she set a great example for with me, and that includes being responsible for co-parenting
Mm-hmm.
when you're in that situation, when you're managing a situation where your child is in shared households. There are positives and negatives, so I try to lean toward positives, with my
Right.
children.
Right.
When things are cooperative, it's double everything.
Mm-hmm.
It's a win-win, and it makes them, I think, more flexible. They're not afraid to travel. They're not afraid to think outside of the box, you know.
Right.
So
Right.
parents have to be willing to kill the old vision, whatever vision you had, and you know, create a new one that allows the child to do that.
That's real. That's real.
Mm-hmm.
So co-parenting, quick definition, according to Google, co-parenting is sharing the duties of raising a child and is used especially of parents who are separated or not in a relationship. And from our conversation, leading up to this, we talked about co-parenting is two people who work consciously and collectively for the benefit of the next generation, right? So what is co-parenting to you? Like, what is your definition of it, like, in terms of how do you see those shared responsibilities carried out? What are the duties of the parents, so on and so forth? Like, how do we make this function in a healthy and viable sense for the child's sake?
Well, you need a parenting plan. You know, it's something that, well, if you are married and you go through a divorce, you know, then a judge walks you through things that have to be reconciled step by step. But if you don't marry, you still have to reconcile these same things. You still have to decide on holidays, child support, custody. You know, those are conversations that need to be had, not things to argue about over and over and over. You know,
Right.
Create a plan, stick to it as much as possible, and go with the flow.
Planning, that is important. And then when we look at our experiences, just in the communities that we find ourselves, and we do see co-parents functioning, and then you got both sides of the spectrum. You got those who do it even with the new relationships they may be in, and the focus is on the child, and you'll see healthy, extended families working together for the sake of the child on one side. Then on another side, you'll see the complete opposite. You'll have adults acting like children, immature, and not being able to really move forward, in a sense that is allowing them to get to a place where they can really focus on the child's development, and as opposed to their personal sentiments, that they're really passing on to the child and doing more harm to the child. Like, so in that, what's the balance and the reconciliation of that? How do you get to a place where you can function outside of your personal sentiments and get to really think about the child's well-being? Because that is what I see is like the biggest challenge that some of our fathers and mothers experience, in dealing with bitterness. And we even talked about the bitter father, who does estrange their child, or the bitter mother who doesn't allow her father, the child's father, to see the child, right? So how do you find that balance? Like, what are some of the things that you have experienced that have allowed you to come to a balance despite some of the actions that I carried out, that weren't favorable?
Oh, it was so challenging.
I mean, that's the reality of it, though.
Yeah. Well, I looked at the reality of it. One of the things my mom said was, when you have a child with someone, the decision is made. Like, it's made at that point, right? So if you break up, there are certain things you don't get to negotiate, so to speak, right? Like, right. I mean, some people do feel like, well, I have to meet whoever you're going to have the child around, or all these ridiculous rules people come up with, but you have to trust your decision. Like, it's done, right? So acceptance is big. I think sometimes, like, the man might regret the woman, or the woman might regret the man, and so they reject the child. But people can get through that and get past that, and just put the child first. Right. And they're great. Like, I'll talk to my children. What do you want? There were times when I was upset, with Millie's dad, and if it was about me and how I felt, then it's like whatever. I don't even want to deal with it. That's usually the case for men or women. They throw their hands up. When I talk to my friends, I don't want to deal with it.
Right.
But meanwhile, the child still wants to go to that birthday party, or like they don't care about your adult issue. They really don't. They just want birthday cake. They want to play with their cousins, and they want to move on with life. So if you can remember that, stay humble and protect their innocence. They don't need to be involved, but
right.
If there's a healthy relationship on the other side and the child wants to go and it's possible, why not?
Let it flow.
No if doubt. They don't want to go, those are conversations to be had as well.
Mm-hmm. But why is that? Like, what is preventing you from wanting to go? Like, what thoughts are you having? All that stuff. Yeah, that's deep. That's deep. This is a live show, too, so if anybody wants to call in, ask any questions, you can call in. Our number is 816-599-6893. You can also comment on our Facebook page on KUAW, the watch party that we have as well, on the Facebook. And then also it's live on YouTube. So we have a couple of different streaming outlets here that we're talking about co-parenting today. Do you think that, well, I'm going to share this. For me, my childhood, I look at my childhood and the experience that I had with my father, who my mother left him when I was 4 or 5 years old, due to some of the habits that he had, due to some trauma that he experienced when his father was murdered that he never really was able to get over. And so when my mother left him, I believe he became a bitter father and in turn pretty much just like neglected me, right? And it's interesting because in my experience as a father with my 3 sons, I see parts of me in them due to some of the decisions that I've made, right? But now that also motivates me to make sure that I do not become that absentee father, right? And so, making the efforts that are, made to ensure that my children know me, that my children are comfortable talking with me, that, they're familiar with one another as brothers, like those are important principles for me. But I was going to ask, like, how significant do you think our childhood experiences play a role in our adult co-parenting situations?
Think it defines your childhood experience defines your reality, right? And that's what we have to remember as parents now, is that we're creating the paradigm for them, and sometimes the conversation you have with the other parent is their first lesson in conflict resolution,
right?
So however your parents handled that, I think that goes for married couples or couples co-parenting in separate households. It's something that my answer is to always put the child first. Like you can't, at some point, yes, it does influence what's happening, but it's also so familiar that you should be able to recognize the pattern.
Right.
And then decide like what outcome do I really desire, and you won't get it. You won't understand. Like with my mom, I saw a pattern happening with my daughter. And so I decided I don't want to respond in the same way. And it is an unknown world, you have to try different things, but just look forward, understand that yes, how you were parented affects how you parent, but once you become a parent, like you're on a timeline. You don't have a lot of time to reflect on that without deciding how to move forward.
Indeed. And this is where I think the plan comes in, because when you get the principle established above and beyond the emotion, it becomes more focused on the child, right? So going back to your earlier response about the importance of establishing plans for co-parenting to be functional and to be, fluid, that really defines that relationship. And that's something that I've had some struggles with, and we've had conversations recently about that in terms of dealing with that principle of co-parenting, because co-parenting also can have an effect outside of the relationship of a co-parenting couple. You know what I'm saying? Like, it just compounds at times, because I have, two other children outside of, our child, and finding that that way to juggle, all of those dynamics can be challenging. And, your encouragement to make sure the plan is followed, is something that is important, that I'm still learning to do, and all the challenges that I face with that dynamic. But, I think that does present a viable solution, if it's followed and stuck to, in terms of getting that plan in place and following it. And it's a challenge, because that's where, emotion comes into it, and you sometimes just want to have your child in that certain context, in that certain reach, to be available, in certain dynamics. So dealing with that, right? Looking at, of course, the plans, we talked about forgiveness. What are some of the other contributing factors that you see goes into creating good co-parenting situations? Plan, we talked about the plan, like dealing with more personal responsibility, right? Like what personally responsibilities do we as parents have to assume to be, good co-parents? Like what type of traits would you say would have to be present?
Being good co-parents is like being a good group, like a class assignment, right? The child is the product. Like, if you've ever taken an online class, you might have to turn in your part, someone else turns in their part. You may not even have to interact with each other, as long as you're producing the desired result. That's always the measuring stick. How well is the child doing? Do we agree on the vision, about where the child should be now? As long as that's happening, then there shouldn't be a lot of friction. And even if it's not happening, there shouldn't be friction if you're trying to reach the same goal. Now, if you have different visions, then a lot, you might have to just, go to God about. I've had to use my faith a lot in co-parenting. You don't have to agree on everything. I think you said that earlier.
Right.
But just have your principles, intact, and be consistent in who you are.
Right. It requires like some selflessness, maturity, accountability, and discipline. Like, these are some of the things I'm thinking of that assist in being a good co-parent, because as you focus on the child, you want your children to see you functioning in a healthy light, right? You don't want your children to see you volatile and unstable and, just broke down, hurt and pain. I mean, you want them to know that there is this side of life as well, but at the same time, you don't want them to see you in that particular just flow. That's not your flow. That's not your everyday. You may have moments when that does come, but you want your children to see you, as a functioning adult. And that requires us to be able to function. Go ahead, though.
Yeah, you have to function. Like, there are so many lessons they get to learn because they're going through it with you no matter what, when it's good and when it's bad.
Right.
You know,
Right.
if you do have those moments where things get emotional, it is important how they see you respond to that. You know, because that's where they get their discipline from. That's what they'll learn. That's how they'll learn to respond to crisis in life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so
Right.
or even joy. You know, everything. You know.
True.
So.
Very true. Very true. So you are listening to Shifting Paradigms with your host, B. Michael. We're talking about co-parenting with Candace Benton today. We're going to take a brief intermission for some station identification, and then we're going to come back and we're going to wrap this conversation up for this hour. But I want to thank you all for listening in. Again, if you do want to call in, we do have a number, 816-599-6893. I see some comments on Facebook. We may read some of those in a moment. But we're going to take a brief break and be right back.
All right, you're listening to KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. We don't only bring you videos on Facebook and YouTube, but listen to our audio only, where you'll get shows like Cheryl Underwood and Blues Time in the City. You can pick us up at www.kuaw.org or go to the TuneIn app and search KUAW. Listen to us. We're on 24 hours a day. That's KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. And this is what you hear every day from noon till 2. Don't miss the Cheryl Underwood Show.
It's the jump off. Welcome to the Cheryl Underwood Show.
That's what I'm talking about. Courtney Black. Where are we going, Kyle Irving?
George R. Smith College in Sedalia, Missouri. It was open from 18.
It's Courtney Black with the facts on Cheryl Underwood Radio, and you are in the entertainment segment with Courtney and Kyle. It's time for a social media shout out. Today I'm shouting out from Instagram my girl Donna Webster. What's up, Donna? We appreciate you, girl. If you want me to shout you out, follow us on Instagram at Cheryl Underwood Radio.
You are listening to KUAW Radio, home of the all-new Jamal Bakes Show, and I'm Jamal Bakes, and thank you so very much for listening to the station bringing you talk, news, entertainment that you won't get anywhere else. KUAW, in, of, and about our community.
This is comedian Janelle Banks, and you are listening to KUAW, Kansas City.
This weekend is the last weekend before Thanksgiving, and on Blues Time in the City.
You say I be bashing men's.
Man bashing? That's Miss Jody. Man bashing. She's talking this weekend, and Tina Turner's birthday is on Thanksgiving Day, so we're showing Tina much love. Join me, Roger Bailey, for Blues Time in the City. Your weekend stop for the best in blues and southern soul. This weekend, right here.
KUAW listeners, this is Carl Boyd for Wave Your Grades, coming to you every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. right here on KUAW. This program features American students striving for excellence in honor of our troops and American veterans, encouraging American students. Please join us every Saturday from 1 until 2 p.m. right here on KUAW.
All right. Are we live again? We're live again. We had a quick break from Candace, but we're talking about co-parenting paradigmatics. We're just talking about what it takes to be a good co-parent, you know, and our experiences really have lended some insight to her and I about what it takes to be a co-parent. You know, for me, I have 3 children with 3 different women. So I have 3 children's mothers that I have to find a way to juggle and balance and, you know, bring everything into alignment. And it's been, you know, a pretty daunting task at times. But, you know, for the most part, the children are you know, they're healthy. They have a very, you know, balanced life for the most part, you know, and they've adjusted well. And there's something about children and their resilience that's deep, you know. And I know, me being the product also of a broken home, of a you know, a family that had been divorced, it presented challenges that I really didn't even recognize until much later in my adult life. And those challenges have even carried over into some of my relationships, of course, that are reflective of, you know, my co-parenting experiences. And so it's been a very interesting journey to say the least. You know, I believe you're muted, Candence. You're muted. Dealing with this though, so what do you see? Well, let's frame it like this. You know, when we look at, let's say, our parents and our grandparents, right, and their parenting experiences, their family, you know, the role of family, they seem to really make sacrifices for that family as opposed to just look at their personal experience, and you know, they stuck it out. You know, we had committed parents for good, bad, and ugly, you know, and they decided to endure that, which may not have even been a good thing necessarily, you know, for various reasons, because the parents could have been, you know, very bad examples of parents in the house, but they decided to stay together. But what are some of the differences that you would see, that you know, even have experienced? Let's go back 2 generations to our grandparents to the present, that exist in, you know, family structures and parenting dynamics. Like what are some of the dynamics that you see at work that you would compare and contrast?
Oh my God, it's all over the place, really. You know, well, my grandparents were married. They raised 7 children. My grandfather and grandmother, of course, I'm going to say they were awesome. I was pretty young when they passed away. But my mom, growing up in their household, you know, her judgment about parents staying together for the sake of the kids affected the way she made decisions, and her decision to leave her marriage, you know, while we were still young. So, my personal experience, you know, growing up in a single parent household, I think had a greater influence on me than understanding, you know, really what the core was there with my grandparents that kept them together. Mm-hmm. And I think the important thing is, if at all possible, marry the right person, you know, the first time. Right. So, you know, but, you know, once you get yourself entangled and then you have to detangle it all, you know, just like love yourself, you know, love the other person if possible. You know, it's not easy. It's not an easy thing, but it doesn't have to be misery and suffering. You know, you have to be able to make adult decisions, right. You know, and people have to make those same decisions in the household, out of the household. Like, I think maybe a part of the problem is people, once they're out of the household, they feel exempt, you know, in some way, or maybe feel more accountability or build more accountability, you know, being able to be more present. So I don't know. I don't have the answers, but
just your perspective. We're just getting your perspective, you know, insights. Yeah, that's
all. I think, you know, you learn what to value, you know, along the way if you don't get it up front.
Right. You know, I want to encourage you, and I know, to own our experiences and the wisdom that we've gleaned from it, you know, because there's insight and wisdom that we have in sharing this, because, you know, the pain, the love, the whole gamut gives us that wisdom, that experience. And I can honestly say, in my experiences with co-parenting, you know, you've taught me a lot, you know, about even love, and most importantly, forgiveness. We talked about that earlier, but that's something that we need to extend to ourselves individually as well. We need to love and forgive ourselves as well in that process of being great co-parents. And I never realized the amount of, you know, shame and guilt and lack of forgiveness that I offered myself for years, you know, and having a mirror to really deal with that, as opposed to just, you know, beat me down because, you know, I'm having challenges and triggers and, you know, just going into an automatic reaction as opposed to really thinking about and responding what my behavior is symptomatic of. It's like you know, if you don't have a moment to breathe and really make sense of your behaviors and patterns, you're going to continue to be in that vicious cycle, you know. And the wisdom that I've learned from just interacting with you, you know, has been tremendous, because it showed me so much about, you know, what love is, what forgiveness is about. So own that, you know, you need to own that. You got it. You know, you got answers, because they're your answers, you know. So I just encourage you.
Yeah. Well, praise y'all for that. You know, he gets all the glory. I tell you that if it was left up to me, you know, I would probably come to a much different conclusion. But
Right.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thing. Love is always the answer. And it's something that I guess it's like a challenge, like, you know, how people do challenges on Facebook. You know, it's like it became a real life challenge for me. You know, like I could check somebody, like, you know, really bad. I could go there, but the results, you know, like it doesn't really yield the results that I'm going for, you know, long term. So it's like at a certain point, you try love, you know.
Yeah.
So ever since then, it's been working for me.
Right. And I think, you know, love is really informed by our faith, you know, and I know that faith has played a significant role in this redemptive process of co-parenting and making sure that Noah is getting everything he needs from his parents. And there's still much, you know, to give, and there's still, you know, room for improvement and growth in my capacity as his father. But it's like, you know, it has brought us to a point where we can, you know, start to discuss these things at least, right? And to make sense of how we can, you know, raise this child into a man, you know, because it's a harrowing experience, even as a two-parent home, raising our children in today's world. But then being in a co-parenting situation presents an even more challenging circumstance. But talk about like the role that faith played. Like, you know, how did faith like really teach you about love and forgiveness? And because I think what happens in a lot of co-parenting circumstances turn bad is there is no love and there is no forgiveness. It's just animosity and bitterness and you know, vitriolic, just like, I can't stand you. You know, you see some of the worst take place when it comes to people who at one time you said you loved and you had a child with. So how did faith inform you in that context?
Well, faith for me, you know, my faith is in Yah. My faith is in the Most High. That's who I love first. That's who I love from. Forgiveness is something that I do believe requires repentance. You know, I don't think of forgiveness as just a pass, you know, to say, oh, what you did is okay, you know, but well, one, it frees me, right? Two, it gives you the opportunity to be free. You know, ultimately, I would say that the major change has come from your side, and you may want to talk more about what actually influenced that for you. Because for me, like I said, it's always been an open door. My faith has always been in the truth, understanding and knowing who Noah is and knowing who you are. And so it was cloudy, you know, when your judgment was different, you know, really asking myself, who are you? You know, like, do I see you correctly? Right. So I can deal with you correctly and have, you know, expectations that won't make me want to just, you know, blow my cap. Like, it's just, understanding this is crucial, you know. So with Noah, I put my love in him. that's where I went with that energy. He still knew who he was. He still saw family pictures. He still learned names. Like, my hope was always that even if it's when he's an adult, I don't want him to feel like a stranger in his family.
Right.
It'll come together, whenever Yah brings it all together. But I don't want him, whatever I could do to contribute to that, I put it in him. So that required a lot of faith that I'm grateful for, because I feel like he will ultimately understand, his creator to be his father, and to know ultimately, who's leading him and who's guiding him.
Right.
And you've been given the gift, the opportunity to step into that role while he's a minor, if you choose to.
Mm-hmm.
But I've also been blessed in ways that I can see that there is no lack unless you allow lack to exist in your life. People being present, it's important, but you have to see what a gift that opportunity is. So.
And it affected me through conviction. I got convicted of hypocrisy. There were some things that I was, on the surface doing, but underneath I was still, kind of, like I said, fragmented, and not really dealing with myself in a true light. I had to reconcile that. I had to deal with it, because my conscience is real. I have a conscience. Praise the Most High for that. And you confronting me on that level really challenged me, and you stayed pretty consistent with it. It wasn't like you were like haranguing me or anything, but you would, pass some check-ins and be like, look, your son. And I'm just like, wow, yeah. And it just was, getting that stony heart out. It was attrition. It was a good attrition in that sense. So it was just, wearing me down, because I had allowed myself to get into a space where I wasn't receptive to that, and then as those clouds started to dissipate and I started to see things more clear and making sense of the life that I had created, and taking responsibility for it, it just brought about forgiveness of self, and an extension of love, which I'm still learning to do, on how to love and how to be, available spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and physically for, the family. So it's been a very winding road, but we've got to a place where we can be, supportive of Noah together. So it's a journey. It's a journey, to say the least. So Cole,
can I ask you a question?
Please do.
How did you get to that place? Because from my perspective, the type of relationship we had, and I mean, from the poetry to the covenant to, a multitude of things, like, I did see you a certain way.
Right.
And even when Noah was born, you were there. There was no question. You were supportive, for a time after he was born. And then it was like the lights went out.
Right.
How did that happen?
Yeah, that's a real question. I think the fact that there wasn't closure in my life was a factor, in the sense that I started feeling overwhelmed. Right, I had gotten a lot on my plate that I wasn't now aware of how I was going to manage. And as you said, like when Noah was 5 months and you got into that relationship, I kind of just really just checked out in some ways. I think I wasn't in a relationship then, but when I got into my other relationship, and that kind of deferred my responsibility, so to speak, right? Of course, my firstborn, Mosiah, there was some things I was going through with him as well, and it was just like a fuse blew, and I just went into a complete dark spot, and in my guilt, in my shame, in my failure to really produce what we had talked about, it just made me ostracize myself and just really just default into a place of like, it's not me, you know. And so it was a hard, very hard and dark area of my life, you know. I think I was like 33, 34. The early and mid 30s was a very challenging time for me. And so there were some influences. I had some influences as well. Perspectives of paternity, you know. And so that also played a role when that's what brought about the paternity test that we did on Ricky Smiley show. As a matter of fact, that was crazy. But it really, you know, it was just a self-denial first. You know, that was the first part that allowed me to deny it, because I denied, you know, my responsibility myself. So it was a very masquerading time for me, you know, and it just caught up eventually. So it just, you know, just something that in hindsight was, you know, one of the worst decisions I made as an adult, to deny that, you know, to my son. So that was challenging. That was really challenging. But I'm thankful that I had a co-parent that was intent on keeping that connection alive between our son and me, you know. So that was huge. That was very big. So yeah, to answer your question.
Yeah. Yeah.
Any last reflections, because we're getting near this hour of wrapping it up. Any tips, any insights that you may want to share for someone in a challenging co-parenting relationship right now that you know you've learned from, and what you would offer to them?
Oh, definitely. Get to know God for yourself. You know, have that relationship, you know, because your creator, you know, is your best friend, you know, your best co-parent, your best companion in life, your best partner in life. You know, have that relationship in place first, and it will lead you and guide you through the challenges that come with life in general, but particularly co-parenting. I really believe that. You know, life will lead you to the right places and to the right people. Everyone's journey is different. But, you know, if you're staying grounded and you're staying rooted, you know, and you're pushing through and you're doing it one day at a time, you know, then, you know, get your daily bread. That's what I would say.
It's a good word. It's a good word. For brothers, you know, I just encourage us to be responsible. You know, if we've created a life, we have to be responsible for that life. You know, that child did not ask to be here, but that child deserves to be here and to be loved and cared for. Given
you're pushing through and you're doing one day at a time, you know, then, you know, get your daily bread.
Oh, okay. So yeah, we have to be responsible for the creation that, you know, we were 50% involved in making. So, you know, it's definitely something that's deep. Your mother had a comment real quick. Your mother says children's emotional need is just as important as any other vital need. For example, if you only had a fourth a slice of bread and hungry children to feed, do you eat the bread or suck up your hunger to feed your children? This is the same love we should offer to protect our children's emotional health. I believe laying your burdens on your children is abusive. I know teenage parents who understand this better than some adult parents with children. Effective parenting takes skills. Therefore, in my opinion, a class on parenting should be taught at the middle school level. Preparation is everything. That's very insightful. Toda for that, Imam. So yeah, this is Shifting Paradigms, Co-Parenting, Paradigmatics. You had Candace Benton here live with me this evening in the Zoom. was gonna say in the studio, but you're in the Zoom. And so I want to thank you for taking the time to, share such an intimate part of your life, a very, challenging time in our lives, and being comfortable enough to open up and share that with our listeners. And prayerfully, people have been touched by this. And yeah, any other thoughts you have, young lady?
No.
You good?
Peace and love.
Peace and love. Peace, love, and light. Yes, indeed. That's real. So next show we will have in about 2 weeks, we're going to be dealing with the cinematic paradigmatic with a brother by the name of Dennis Delamer. He actually has a new movie that he just dropped out about Black Wall Street. We're going to be talking about that. So I'm pretty excited to have him on the show as well for our next show coming up in 2 weeks. But I want to thank you again, Candace Benton, for being here. Thank you for the listeners for tuning in, for the comments that you all made. Tune in next time to Shifting Paradigms. We'll be back in 2 weeks. But upcoming next, we have Skrilltown, and they're going to be doing what they do. But thank you all again for tuning in. This is B. Michael, your host for Shifting Paradigms, signing out. Peace and blessings. Shalom, shalom.
All right, you're listening to KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. We don't only bring you videos on Facebook and YouTube, but listen to our audio only, where you'll get shows like Cheryl Underwood and Blues Time in the City. You can pick us up at www.kuaw.org or go to the TuneIn app and search KUAW. Listen to us. We're on 24 hours a day. That's KUAW Radio, Kansas City's global community radio station. And this is what you hear every day from noon till 2. Don't miss the Cheryl Underwood Show.
It's the jump off. Welcome to the Cheryl Underwood Show.
That's what I'm talking about, Courtney Black. Where are we going, Kyle Irby?
George R. Smith College in